And so I'll come back to that in terms of how you can round out your schedule based on how you're thinking about that. But first, I want to talk in a little bit more detail about this course, or these two courses, I should say, that all of you will have to take as first years, and these are your first year foundation courses. The first year foundation courses are made up of first year English and first year seminar. And while one of them has seminar in the title, I also just want to clarify that a seminar is a certain format of course, as opposed to a lecture. And so you are going to take lots of courses during your time at Barnard that would be considered seminars, but they might not have seminar in the title in the way first year seminar does. And the difference is a lecture is something kind of along the lines of what's going now. Someone stands up and shares a lot of information with you that can sometimes be structured and easy to follow, sometimes can be a little dense and a little stressful to follow, but there is something being presented to you. You take notes furiously and you leave the class saying, okay, now I know what the teacher wanted me to know, let me process that, think about it, work with it. A seminar functions differently in terms of how the content of the course is really created. So all of you will do what you do in a lecture course, which is read similar text, read shared texts. But when you come into class, you will sit around a table. Some of you might have this experience in high school already, many of you may not. You will sit around a table, it will be a small number of students, anywhere from 10 to 15 to 20, and there will be a conversation about that material. Sometimes the professor will have some information to share. Sometimes the professor will do little more than ask questions and based on her or his expertise help guide the conversation, but then really wants to hear from everyone in the room. What did you notice? What did you have questions about? How does this build on what we talked about before? And through this kind of conversation and the way that all of you interact with one another as you think, as you debate, as you question, that creates some of the content of the course. So it's not quite the same, we all know what we are supposed to learn from the course, it's really a process of discovery with the benefit of a guide who has a great deal of experience, your professor. So first year English and first year seminar are designed in part to introduce you to this kind of class. Many of you may take more of those seminar style classes later as you become more advanced students, and if you are in areas that have large, what we call gateway courses, this may be one of the only times you get a chance to do this first year. You may be in large classes if you're taking Intro to Biology or Intro to Chemistry or Intro to Art History. You may find that there are 100, 150 people in those classes. So we want to make sure that you have at least one class where you have this small environment to learn about a seminar-style class, to be introduced to the culture of Barnard and Columbia and what some of the expectations of college-level work are, and to get used to not only writing on the college level and the kinds of essays you'll be asked to write and the kind of arguments you'll be asked to make, but also speaking, as I've just been emphasizing. I think one of the many impressive qualities of a Barnard graduate is her ability to articulate herself well and to not only say what's on her mind, but be ready to back it up, be ready to have it questioned, to be ready to talk about it, and to be ready to adapt when new information or new ideas are presented to her that she hasn't yet considered. That is one of the chief benefits of these small seminar classes. So that's what we're going to ask you to get used to in these first year foundation courses. In some ways, you might find that there's not a very different experience between how first year English functions and feels and how first year seminar functions and feels, but there are a few distinctions. I'll talk about them in a little detail because this might affect which one you would prefer to take first and which one second, because we do need to fit all of you first year students into one of these classes, and so half of you will take one kind of course first semester and half of you the other, and then spring semester you'll switch. Obviously, with so many of you in either order, there is no strong advantage or disadvantage to taking them in either order, but you may have preferences based on what I'm about to describe. So let me tell you a little bit. First year English, if you turn to page 26, you will see that first year English comes in three flavors, if you will, or three topics. And these topics, as you'll see, it's housed in the English department, and so you are reading literary texts with a little bit of interdisciplinary text thrown in for context. And you are asked to talk about that in some similar ways that you might be used to thinking about in English class, but you're also going to write about them. And there's going to be a lot of emphasis on how do you use this literature as a lens to practice your writing, to take your writing perhaps to the next level. And even if you are already a strong writer, how do you hone it? How do you make it even more sophisticated, more concise, more argumentative? All of these things that you will want to continue to improve while you're at Barnard. So you'll see that each one of these topics on page 26, covers a kind of literary tradition based on either an area of the world or on a particular theme. So, but what's perhaps a little different is some of these might seem like they correspond to something you're already doing in high school, but the idea is that the reading lists are a little bit complicated. And what I mean is that they are deliberately being complicated by adding in some texts that might not be part of what you've read in high school. So when you see the Americas, you might immediately think American literature. But traditionally, American literature classes are really United States literature. What the Americas is doing is saying, you know, we've got two different parts of our hemisphere that went through some really similar kinds of things when you're talking about big eras of history, exploration, colonization, revolution. What happens if we look at literature from North America and South America and Latin America together and kind of compare it, think about what's going on that's similar, what's going on that's distinct, and why is that interesting for us to consider? Legacy of the Mediterranean, in some ways, is kind of a great books course. You'll see that there's the Odyssey, the Aeneid, Inferno, and so you will be reading some works that we think are really great works to have read, but we're also complicating them by adding in some works that are perhaps a little more specialized, but kind of throw into relief some interesting things about that tradition. For example, in the medieval period, you would be reading not only Dante's Inferno, but you'd be reading the work of Marjorie Kemp, who was a medieval mystic in England who had some very wacky experiences and kind of bring up some interesting things about the experience of not only medieval faith, but some interesting things that throw gender into the mix. So it's just a way of reading some wonderful texts, but also thinking about some of the ways that we might have become kind of comfortable thinking about them and raising some questions about those traditional ideas. And then women and culture, again, you will read some great works from the classic period through the Renaissance period, but again, there will be texts that you might not have heard of already and that will help create hopefully a very complex and interesting conversation. The written work is around essays. You will be asked to write essays that really put forward a point of view about what you're reading and practice backing up that point of view. You will then be asked at the end of the semester to write a college-level research paper, and you will be walked through that process. You will receive orientation to the library. You will learn how to think about a research paper that you come up with yourself, a topic, how to go through the planning period, how to engage with scholarly research, and to engage with it not to summarize it, but to really have a dialogue with it, to say, here's what I'm trying to show, and here's how I think that I can basically use the work of scholars and engage the work of scholars to help me learn more about what I want to say. So for some students, that's a point of preference right there, walking through the process of a college research paper first semester. Most classes, if you are taking introductory level classes, are not expecting you to do very advanced research papers, and so if you do that second semester in first year English, that's fine. You will still then get, during your first year of college, that process that we want you to go through. But for some people, they like to do it right away. For some people, they don't mind waiting. The other thing you might want to think about is, as we just looked at the reading lists that are on page 26, you may have noticed that they all end at a certain period of time that's still kind of in the distant past. Legacy of the Mediterranean and Women and Culture both end around the early Renaissance period. The Americas ends around 1830, just as the American Renaissance is getting underway. If you take first year English in the spring, it's a different reading list. It picks up from those chronological points and move forward. So you will start in Legacy of the Mediterranean Women Culture with Renaissance texts and move up to something 20th century, maybe even 21st century. Americas starting in the 1830s and again moving up to a very recent point. So for those of you who are thinking, well, I would like to read the classics, I've never read the Odyssey, maybe I should, or for those of you who are saying, I love the Odyssey, I'd kind of like to read it in this context, you may want to have first year English first semester. For those of you who are thinking, I think Virginia Woolf is the bee's knees and I want to save first year English for spring, you can do that. And in fact, if I could, if it's still up, yes, the first year blog, I do want to highlight, if I can get it back up, which I'm not doing well, unfortunately. On the first year blog, there is, sorry, I think I linked to it. Yes, I should have just gone to the next line. There is a post from last week that says FAQ first year English courses / topics. And it not only repeats a little of what I just said, but it links you to the page in the English department where you can see a little bit more about the text. And so, for example, if you want to say, well, what are they going to read in the spring in Legacy of the Mediterranean? If you go into Legacy of the Mediterranean and click on course information, then you will see, as we scroll down the page, fall semester and some of the key texts that you will read. Not quite everything probably you'll see on the syllabus, the key texts. And then if continue down to spring semester, you'll see that you will start with the first major text being Paradise Lost and moving from there into the 20th century. You can find the same information for the Americas and for women and culture. So you may want to later, when you're thinking about this, look and see what the reading lists are both semesters, and if that is a point of preference for you, then we can usually accommodate a preference for taking first year English either fall or spring, depending on what your interests are. Now, let me talk, and I will try to keep this brief so we can move on to questions, but I do want to talk a little bit about first year seminar because it can be a distinct experience or it could actually be an extension of the first year experience. And that is because if you look on pages 27 forward, on page 27 in particular, you'll see that we now have sort of 3 large categories of classes, and then within those categories we have certain kinds of topics. And the very first category you'll see has a similar category title, Reinventing Literary History, that you'll see on page 26 when we were talking about first year English. And that is precisely because of what I've just been talking about, the fact that there are different reading lists in the fall and the spring. And some of you might say, well, I want to read the Odyssey and To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. You can have the experience of following one of these literary traditions through both semesters to kind of see what the arc would be like, to start back in the classical era or back with the mythological origins in the case of the Americas, and go all the way through the 20th century by taking one of these classes as your first year English class and one of these classes as your first year seminar class. They will follow pretty much the same reading list, and they will feel somewhat similar, although the seminar kinds of assignments may vary a little bit, and I'll come back to that. So that's why you see, as you flip through pages 28, 29, 30, 31, you'll see the Americas, Legacy of the Mediterranean, and Women in Culture again. So if any of you would like to do what we kind of casually call the full sweep of one of these literary traditions, please feel, we can generally accommodate that easily. You can show that in the rankings that you're going to submit to us, and you can also include that on the online form that you'll be filling out in early July. There is a comments box, which is a place you can put all kinds of questions or preferences. But for example, if you'd like to take 2 semesters of one of these literary traditions, that's something that you can note for us. That's pretty easy to accommodate. Let me wait on that just a moment. Again, on page 27, the second category of first year seminars you'll see is reacting to the past. And this is a special thing to us here at Barnard because this is a type of class that was developed by a professor in our history department, a professor named Mark Carnes. And it's a class that he and several of his colleagues ran for years here and then became so popular, it's now taught at liberal arts colleges all over the country. And in fact, just last weekend, we had a Reacting to the Past conference here where professors from lots of different colleges from around the country came and practiced the games, as they call them, and talked about the pedagogy of teaching these classes. And it's a really exciting kind of format for some students. And so I'll describe it briefly, but please note that there's a website dedicated to it that's noted in your book. And so if this sounds at all appealing, I would encourage you to go to the website, read even more, and even see a video of one of these classes in progress. Because they will take a moment in time, a moment in history, and it's an idea of not just learning about this moment of history, but reenacting it in lots of different ways. You will read a shared text together. So for example, most Reacting to the Past classes begin with the trial of Socrates in ancient Athens. And all the students would read Plato's Republic together. But then all the students are assigned roles for the game they're about to play. And some of these roles are actual figures from history who were part of this process. And then some are kind of created roles that represent different parts of the population, different factions that may need to be persuaded or may have some role to play. And then everyone goes off and researches their individual roles. Sometimes there are factions who need to get together and plot and collude and plan things. And emails are flying back and forth. People are meeting at midnight to plan things. And you often come in to give presentations. And you present to one another, and then you kind of determine who has won the day in the game. And occasionally it can actually work out a little differently from history. I believe Socrates has lived at least once that I've heard of, if not more. So it's not necessarily about learning the actual history as much as it is learning the actual history, but then really practicing the art of persuasion and figuring out how to take research you've done and come in and use it. So some people, and when they hear me describe this, may automatically think, okay, this is for the theater people, this is for the debate people, this is not for me if I'm not the person who is my hand up first in class or something like that. But I have talked to many students who have taken this class either because they liked the idea of the history, they liked the idea of the roles, they liked the idea of practicing public speaking when it wasn't something that they were particularly confident about. And there have been some students who've told me, when I have to present something that's presenting someone else, I have to do justice to this role. It's not just me presenting an idea off the top of my head. It sort of frees me up to really think about whether I'm saying things that I want to say and presenting things I want to present. So some students find it a really great challenge, even if they don't think of themselves as performers by nature. So I would encourage you to look at that website if any of this is sounding appealing and see a little bit more about the class. We do offer it both semesters. So whether you want to take first year English first or second semester, Reacting to the Past would be available to you the other semester. And again, we can usually accommodate that kind of preference. And then the very last category of first year seminar is special topics. And those are a lot of the ones that you will see as you leaf through pages 27 to 31. And the thing that can be a little bit different experience about these from first year English is these are not necessarily housed in the English department the way first year English is. These are taught by professors from all over Barnard. You could have a chemistry professor teaching this class, or a political science professor, or a philosophy professor, or an English professor. But the topics themselves are developed by the individual professors, and they might be an area of research for that professor. They might simply be a topic near and dear to the professor's heart that isn't actually part of her research or his research, but she has the opportunity to develop this class within this interdisciplinary program. So you might guess from looking at the course descriptions what department a professor might be housed in, but some of them might be a real mix of things that the professor's interested in. So the special topics, we don't have, unfortunately, the opportunity that we had at first year English for you to get a sense of what's going on second semester. But again, second semester is a different combination of courses. You will have the Reinventing Literary History, you will have Reacting to the Past again, but when it comes to special topics, there will be a whole new set of special topics for the spring semester. The ones you're seeing here are, again, only for the fall semester. While I don't have an easy way for you to see them because they won't actually all be in place online until around November when we start planning our spring semester, I think that you can, I can guarantee you that you will see a similar range of classes in terms of the kinds of topics. So if you feel that you want that first year English experience that we described first, I think you can bet that there will be a group of special topics in the spring that will be just as interesting to you and that you will be able to find several areas of interest in. First year seminar can be a little bit different in that you might not be asked to write a research paper. You may be asked to do more oral presentations. You may be asked to do different kinds of writing assignments. I teach a first year seminar in the spring and we do formal essays, but before that we write letters and we even write a small play as ways of thinking about writing that kind of get people out of their comfort zone, and then we think about what we've learned about writing in a new way and bring that back to essays. So you might find what we would think of as kind of alternative assignments that are geared toward building your awareness about your writing. But in some ways, it might feel pretty similar to first year English. The goal is focusing on the seminar discussions, your intense writing, and having a professor who is dedicated to the small group of students and ready to talk with you outside of class and help bring you into this college culture comfortably. The one other thing I'll say about first year seminar that you may have noticed, on page 27, you'll see that there is a program called the In-Residence Seminar Program, and 7 of the first year seminars have opted into this program. The professors have said, yes, I would like to work with an in-residence seminar. And this is an opportunity for your academic and your residential sides to come together around a particular class. So if a student is assigned to an in-residence seminar, she lives on a hallway with the other students in that seminar. Not in the same room, but you're all in the same hallway. And there are a couple different ways that this might just build a different kind of dynamic from other courses. For one thing, after that intense orientation week that we described to you before, when you walk into what might be your very first college class, or certainly one of the first college classes during that week, to see a group of people around the table who are already familiar to you, it can you can hit the ground running with a kind of dynamic that can be really exciting and really special. It's one that all of you will develop in your seminars over the course of several weeks, but with an in-residence seminar, it's just a bit more immediate for some people. You do have the opportunity to leave class and walk back to the hallway and continue talking about what you've been talking about, working on projects together. Some professors develop group projects around the expectation that you all have easy access to one another living on the hallway. And I do hear all of these great anecdotal stories about students who leave class and all as a group walk down to the dining halls together and sit down and continue their discussions. They talk to each other about the Odyssey while they're brushing their teeth, which I can never understand how that works physically, but they figure it out somehow. And so if this sounds fun to you, it is a really great way of experiencing a certain kind of community. Some people think this sounds a little claustrophobic. It is just one class, I would remind you, but it's certainly fine if you think that might be a little too much closeness your first semester. That's why we have all of those non-residential seminars. But as you can imagine, this is a fall-only program because we can't pick you up and move your rooms when we move your seminars spring semester. So if this sounds appealing to you, then it is something you want to think about for your first semester. While we can probably guarantee you a space in a resident seminar, it might not be easy to guarantee you the actual seminar you want most because those individual seminars listed on pages 27 through 31 are limited in size to 16 people. But if you're interested in the program and 2 or 3 of those sound interesting to you, you can certainly rank them at the top of your rankings, and then we can most likely fit you into one if that's appealing. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of talking. I want to pause for a moment, turn things over to Gia for a moment so that she can describe her first year experiences with the first year foundation courses and offer a couple words, and then we'll open things up into questions.
So during my first year, I took first year English first. I took Women in Culture, and then I took first year seminar second, and I took Immortality, Death, and the Meaning of Life, which looks funny on my transcript, and was taught by a philosophy professor. So they were definitely, for me at least, very different classes. It was really nice to have the guarantee of that small class. I was taking a lot of science classes in my first semester. I thought I was going to be a biology major, and I was also pre-med, so a lot of my classes were pretty big. And so it's nice to really have that guarantee that you will have a professor who knows your name, and you will have a class where you know your fellow students. I honestly didn't love my first year seminar and my first year English classes. They were, however, very good opportunities to get involved in, to be familiar with the resources that Barnard offers. What I like to say is that if there's one thing you'll learn at Barnard, it's how to write. And this is really where that starts, because from the very beginning, a lot is being asked of you, but not without support. And so I would really, really encourage you to get to know your first year English professors and your first year seminar professors, because they're there specifically to work with first year students. They are there to help you transition from high school. They're going to have office hours, and you should go to them, even though it will be awkward, because they are there to help you during those office hours, and that's really, really important in terms of workshopping your writing and working through your papers and figuring out what you could be doing better. It's definitely something that I wish I had done more earlier in my college career. and just really taking advantage of the resources that the library has to offer, going to the librarians in the library and asking them for help if you can't find a resource rather than being afraid of them. Things like that, just really this is the time to do those things because they're throwing the resources at you in those classes. And they'll be taught, as Dean Hallbell said, a lot of the first year seminars will be taught by a range of professors from a variety of different departments. So they'll all be very different experiences, but it's really nice to have that shared experience with the students in your class. That's a really great opportunity to start to get to know more people in your year. My roommate was in an in-residence seminar, so I definitely put in a plug for them because she had a wonderful experience. But for some people, as Dean Hallbell also said, can be a little bit claustrophobic. But I just definitely say to take advantage of first year English and first year seminar, regardless of which of the classes you're in, as an opportunity to get to know Barnard's resources and as an opportunity to begin to develop good habits in terms of getting to know your professors and in terms of developing good work habits, and really just, it is your introduction to Barnard's teaching style, so use it as such.
And then I'll just say a word about how we're going to ask you to tell us your preferences so that we can place you in one of these courses, and then we'll open up the floor for questions about these classes. You'll notice on page, I believe it's 32, there is a list of all of the courses. So you've read the descriptions, and you'll see that when it comes to first year English, you still have the 3 topics, but there are lots of different section times when you could take one of these topics. And then under first year seminar, you'll see all of the different sections of first year seminar. As I mentioned before, we do need to place all students into one of these classes or the other. They are all limited in size to 16 students, and so it can be a little bit tricky to get everyone scheduled, which is why we're going to ask you for a lot of different options. And so some of you may have particular preferences for the order of these classes based on what I've described. Some of you may not mind either way because your focus is already on the other classes you're taking. You know you have to take these. It doesn't really matter to you which order you want to take them in. So we're going to give you a chance to kind of express that in the way that you order your rankings for us. We're going to ask you to rank 5 of each types of class, but we're going to ask you to put it into one big list of 10. That list is going to tell us something about your preferences. If all of your first 5 choices are first year seminars and all of your last 5 choices are first year English, that's a pretty clear sense to us that you would prefer to take seminar first. Again, if you want to write in the comments box that that's a strong preference of yours, that's fine too. If you are really attached to a certain topic, let's say this women in culture sounded great to you, you don't mind whether you take it as a seminar or as an English, then the first 5, 6, or even 7 rankings could all be women in culture classes or some kind of combination of English and seminar. You might have other classes that are a priority for you. If you are going to be a pre-med student like Gia was, you may say, well, I need to make sure that I have my time for biology clear. So I know I don't want to take anything Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. And so I think I need to have my first year foundation class Tuesdays and Thursday afternoons. And I'm flexible as to what it is as long as it's in that area. So you might put all of the Tuesday, Thursday afternoon classes at the top of your rankings. We are going to run this, as we will run all the preferences we get, through an initial set of an online computer lottery to try to provide as much equity as possible to the placements. But I will then be going over all of them. And if you do have a strong preference and I see that the lottery wasn't able to do that, I will see what I can do to move things around. So use the rankings to indicate your preferences, use the comments box to indicate the references, and then we will see what we can do in terms of placing all of you into all of these sections over the course of the summer. The question is, does first year seminar do as much as what my description of first year English may have conveyed about preparing you for college level writing? And I'll ask Gia to share her thoughts about this as well, but I would say absolutely. It may come at it from different approaches. There may be some of these alternative assignments I mentioned, but you are constantly asked to write, to step away, to get feedback from your professor, to get feedback sometimes from your classmates, maybe feedback from our writing fellows who are trained upper class students. And then with that feedback to look at your essay again and to revise it, not simply to edit it, but to really think about your ideas and to rewrite them again. Both classes are going to ask you to do that kind of work. So they're both going to ask you to think about writing in a particular way. Gia, would you?
Yeah, I would second that. My first year seminar, what my professor did is she made us initially write very short papers. She made us write one-page paper, I think it was, two-page papers, and then she finally let us write a 5-page paper and I think a slightly longer one as well. And her comment was that by learning to be concise and be learning to make a point in a very small amount of space, we would then be better able to develop our ideas in longer papers. So I think that would also have been very useful in my first semester because I was still developing my writing, being introduced to resources, and working closely with a professor. So you'll still get that benefit even if you do have your first year English class. Now, if you feel very uncomfortable with the prospect of writing a 10-page paper, you probably aren't going to be asked to do it too frequently during your first year in other classes, but if you really, really want to get that experience, because that may well be, first year English may be the place you're most likely to get that experience. If you really want that experience early, then maybe consider taking first year English first, but you will also be working on your writing in first year seminar.
So the question is, if you take first year English second semester, even though there'll be a different list of texts that you read, will you still get the same experience of working through writing and working through a research paper? The answer is yes. The structure, the basic structure of first year English is the same in both semesters. The main difference is just what you're reading as your literature. But again, as I mentioned before, you're using literature as a lens through which to practice your writing. First semester, it's just earlier text, second semester, it's later text, but the kind of things you're writing and the research paper component are the same both semesters. So thank you for asking that, because that can be a little confusing. The question is about how to choose 5 first year English classes when there are only 3 topics. One of the reasons we provide that list on page 32 is to show you all the different section times that are offered for those 3 sections. Some of them are a little more. You'll see that there are more sections of Legacy of the Mediterranean and Legacy of the Women and Culture, because that tends to be where the interest is, and there are fewer courses of the Americas, but you have choices. If you're really interested in taking Women and Culture for first year English, you may list 5 of those sections out of the 16 that you see there, as those would be your 5. They could just be scattered around. I just want to make sure I have Women and Culture. But if it's more about the time slot, as I was mentioning before, if it's about Tuesday, Thursday, you might have some combination of 2 Women and Culture classes, 2 Legacy of the Mediterranean classes, and maybe 1 Americas class. I can't remember the time right now, because you want them all on Tuesday, Thursday afternoon. So you are still thinking about the 3 topics, but you're looking at all the possible times that you could take them, and you're picking 5 of those times and topics. So the question is, do you know who's teaching each course, who the professors are? The answer is different for different courses. First year seminar, because they are drawn from around the college and they are professors who are teaching in other departments as well, and they need to know who's teaching what in those departments, the staffing is done earlier, and so you can find out, and I will show you how to find information on classes in general in a few moments if you haven't already, and you can use the same information to find information on first year seminar. You can find out the professors teaching those seminars. First year English is staffed a little bit later, and they will still be figuring out who's teaching which sections a little bit later in the summer, so we don't have that information available to you before July when you need to send in your form. So that information is usually posted shortly before the beginning of the semester. So you're really going for topic and time then. So the question is, reacting to the past offered both semesters, and the answer is yes. We always try to offer at least 2, sometimes 3 or 4 sections each semester, because it is such a special opportunity, we think. So no matter when you take first year English, you do have the opportunity to take reacting to the past, either or. Yes?
How likely is it that you'll get one of your first preferences?
So the question is, how likely is it for you to get one of your top preferences? I would say from experience, it's pretty good. Again, I hesitate to be too firm in a guarantee, because we do need to place every student into a section, and that can get a little tricky. I mean, certainly we're asking you to provide us with preferences because we want to make sure that those preferences are met. So even though you might have 1 or 2 courses that are really at the top of your list, we're hoping that by choosing 5 section times of first year English out of a possible 16 and 5 first year seminars out of a possible 19, we're still getting your preference to some extent, right? Even if it's not one of your top 2 or 3 choices. Having said that, I think a lot of people do find that they are able to be placed into one of their top choices. You want to take that one?
Yes, so in your first year's English and first year seminar, those are probably two of the only classes in your time at Barnard that will be only Barnard students, the other being possibly your senior thesis. So those are the two where, because they are Barnard specific classes, you will be with only Barnard students. Any other class, pretty much, whether it's taught at Barnard or Columbia, you'll have both Barnard and Columbia students.
Yes.
So you recommend that a student take 4 courses. Would it be consistent with that? One of the courses to be with a lab, since that might be closer to 2 courses in terms of workload?
So the question was about fleshing out your course schedule with another course that might have a lab. I will actually come back to that. We'll talk about that very specifically, about how to round out your courses after going through your thinking about your first year English and first year seminar course. This one we want to give in some detail because, again, it is the one that all of you are required to take, and you might consider this as the first thing you choose before you flip. But at the same time, you might end up thinking about other classes first, and you come back to this material later in your thinking process, and that's fine too. So we will talk about science labs in particular. Any other questions about first year English or first year seminar? Or the in-residence? I will just clarify, in case I didn't make it clear, to be in an in-residence seminar, you must participate in the full experience. You will be placed on that hallway. So sometimes students ask if it's possible to take the class without being on the hallway. That's not the goal. So it is part and parcel, if you're interested. Yes? That's right. The question was about the rest of the hallway. You're absolutely right. It is not just the seminar on the hallway. And in fact, that's one of the reasons why I think it's not quite as claustrophobic as it sounds. It is a hallway of usually, I think the hallways, there's a different seminar on each floor, but each of those hallways is made up of 42 people. So 16 of the people will be on a seminar with you, but you'll also be getting to know lots of people around you, and you will be living with someone not in the seminar.